that time. I think one of the themes that we'd like her to sort of speak to us about was not just the intended consequences, but also some of the unintended consequences of change.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's good to see so many old friends and many forgotten faces. I'd like to thank Professor Thapar for recreating so wonderfully a period that we've all lived through. I have never felt so nostalgic about JNU. I almost feel guilty now saying the things I'm going to say, because I am very much an insider. I've been teaching here since 1985, and as you'll see, you could charge my views with missing the wood for the trees, but I am going to offer views and opinions in a spirit of self-criticism. All I can say is that they're offered in a spirit of complete honesty and self-criticism. So, once upon a time, there was a golden age of JNU, and we were all a part of it. That is a tempting way to start this story, but I will resist this temptation because golden age narratives are typically about pasts that are glorious and entirely perfect, about presents that are disappointing, deficient, and futures that are only dismal. And I'm not sure the past was entirely perfect. It was pretty perfect, but it was not entirely perfect, and I definitely have a personal stake in the future not being too dismal. In my view, and I think the 3 points that I'm going to raise this afternoon are points that Professor Thapar has already mentioned. She's in her very wide-ranging discussion of multiple themes. These 3 have also come up. I'm going to suggest that JNU had 3 defining qualities in the golden age, qualities that I see as imperiled today, and I'd like to make a case for why these qualities are worth recovering. Golden age. The student body was drawn from right across the country, as Professor Thapar mentioned, as all of us have experienced. There was sometimes a preponderance in some centers of people from Bihar or Orissa or West Bengal, but on the whole, the university, that a certain provincialization of JNU has now become
Accepted. I think now we'll...
I don't hardly see any scientists here. Most of the science faculty are not here, except for 1 or 2 that I don't see. And our vice chancellor is here. There are a few things that I want to say. That one thing is that I joined here in JNU as the first batch of science students in 1972, 24 science students. We were 5% of the population, and we always felt neglected. In the hostels, if you didn't know dialectic materialism, you were absolutely not. You were actually put aside, and nobody will interact with you. What? You don't even know that? But, I really enjoyed my first day, I still remember that Cine Club had this retrospective Louis Buñuel films, and today Louis Buñuel, if you ask my students, what kind of scientist, where does he publish, that sort of thing. So, I must say that I really enjoyed there, and after finishing my PhD, I wandered around and then came back and built my scientific and academic career in this place, and I have not regretted for a single day what I've done. I want to bring out a few points about this. First thing, to start with how the life science was. Actually, I can talk about life sciences. I was envisaged at the point. There was people like Obey Siddiqui from TFR and a few others. They actually came out with a vision document of the School of Life Sciences before it was set. If you read that document, I think it was a classic document and way ahead of the time at that time. They envisaged biology as a one unified subject with inputs from physics, chemistry, mathematics, and other sciences. And they also envisaged a way to set up such a school. And they actually put a lot of emphasis on faculty recruitment and that. I would say that not really we taken over, but in the beginning effort was made. And I'm very thankful to the fact that there was no written test at that time. There were only interviews. And I wouldn't have made it if there was a written test, because I came from chemistry and I didn't know B of biology. I just didn't know. I was just excited about biology. I thought maybe my chemistry would be useful to it. I was taken in. 40% of my batchmates were chemistry and physics students. And it was a tremendous, interesting class. We were learning absolutely new things. We were very excited. The whole atmosphere, as pointed out by previous speakers, was very free. Professor Sapori was our teacher. I never called him Professor Sapori. I always called Sudhir, and now I have problems because he is now the Vice Chancellor. And this interdisciplinarity, what was in the students, the peer group was, I would emphasize on the fact that if you have a good peer group, you have a fantastic programs. Teachers can only do so much. We learn so much from each other. We had physicists, chemists, mathematics, and wrote a part of my thesis was on mathematical modeling, what we call today, it is reinvented today as a system biology after 40 years. But part of my thesis was on mathematical modeling of a biological system. What was the JNU ethos or JNU spirit at that time? There was a machine not there. One of my contemporaries, Anindam Sen, built a fluorescence spectrophotometer out of scratch. And this machine is still today here. And that was the spirit that which people started. And the kind of facility we had was absolutely, today, even undergraduate students will say that, what, this kind of facility you work with? But there's a lot of work was done, a lot of papers were done, bubbling activities, seminars were held at 11 o'clock in the night because whole day students were doing experiment. And I must say that our Vice Chancellor used to join us for 3 years. He used to join. We didn't depend upon the teachers to do it. That's what I pointed out. In fact, I must say that the standards of IIT is what it is because of the peer group, not so much because of the teachers. The peer group, how you interact and develop a subject, this is what I think JNU was all about. And this is what happened. Now what happened after that? And this is the point that I want to make. We lost out on the way. Today, I don't even get a single chemistry or physics student make it to it. Whatever way we have done it, our admission policy does not allow any interdisciplinarity. And my theme is going to be interdisciplinarity of this. We're just not able to get people in. We are not able to get a person whom we think knows probably something else, but it doesn't know the core subject, so he can't be admitted. Not there in the system is the ability to actually review our own self, critically look at us. If we can't do it ourselves, let others do it. This is very important to have a dynamic change. I'll just bring out a small biological principle. The biology cells of our bodies, they run through a series of principles. And one of the principles is that if any cell is slightly damaged or not functioning properly, there is a mechanism by which cell will undergo an automated killing process. It's called apoptosis. We don't have a system by which we actually look at all this. We don't have a way by which we can say that, look, why we are not implementing or we are not having interdisciplinary. Can we do something by which we can do it? And can some program we started 40 years back can't be re-looked into, can't be modified, can't be transformed into something else or stop? So if you want to do something, a university has to progress. This question of flexibility, review process and reinvent ourselves has to be put in place. If we don't do that, we don't ever reach it. The other thing is that quite often, and this is maybe a controversy, the decisions cannot be taken by everybody. In questions like undergraduate teaching, and let me give an example of that. Indian Institute of Science has implemented undergraduate teaching, and it was not a very popular decision. It was implemented. Now people who are teaching, they find it is much better. In a bunch of such a faculty that we have here, if we have a core undergraduate students, and if we can teach them, we will probably do a much better job than many of the colleges that are doing. And then they can be a core people who can get into research later on. So I personally feel that some of the decision-making process, hard decisions, we don't have institutional systems by which we can make hard decisions. All our decisions are made by everybody together. And